Hi, okay, so this video is on what is a narcissist, what are the different types of narcissists out there, and what is a sociopath, and what is a psychopath. So this is going to just kind of cover the groundwork, which will, I think, make the next set of videos in this series on the different red flags make a lot more sense. So narcissism is one of those terms, I really hate the term. It's so misused and misunderstood by people, and I think it really adds a huge level of confusion to victims because people don't know what they went through because there's so much confusion regarding this word. So when people normally say this person's very narcissistic, what they're really meaning is, this person's very full of themselves, they're very arrogant, they're very selfish, or they're what I call peacocking. So they've got all this like status stuff, they're driving, a Lamborghini, they're just, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. That's what people think of when they think of a traditional narcissist, like somebody like a Donald Trump, right? But that's not what a clinically diagnosed narcissist is. So let me run through what it takes for a person to be clinically diagnosed as having narcissistic personality disorder. Now, everything I'm going to be saying here in a little bit about the criteria, this comes from a book called the DSM, that stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's a book, it's rewritten, it's revised every couple years, and it's the textbook that mental health professionals work out of. It's the book where they go to consult to see if a person has a certain set of criteria for personality disorders or for mental illness, such as bipolar or schizophrenia. So for a person to have narcissistic personality disorder, they have to have at least 5 of the following criteria. Number 1, have a grandiose sense of self. They exaggerate achievements and talents. They expect to be recognized as superior without the proper achievement. Number 2, they're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. This one would be kind of hard to prove because most narcissists don't think that they're fantasies. Like they think that they're realities, right? So I don't know how you would really even kind of prove that. I guess you'd have to listen to them talk and then you'd have to kind of make that judgment. Okay, so number 3, believes that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or associate with other special or high status people or institutions. Number 4, requires excessive admiration. Number 5, has a sense of entitlement. For example, unreasonable expectations of especially favorable treatment or automatic compliance with his or her expectations. This one is seen, I think, probably the most frequently. And it may not, however, it may not be seen until their mask slips. So that's a term. Narcissists are kind of these actors in life, right? And they go through and they have all these different masks on. They have the mask of the good dad or the good husband or the CEO or all of these different masks. And from time to time, when their bad behavior surfaces, that mask will slip and you see what they really are about. Like with Bill Cosby, right? Here he is, America's dad, and then come to find out, wow, this guy here, he's been giving lectures all over the world about kindness and compassion and being good to each other, and here he is drugging and raping women, assuming that's true, which I believe it is to be true. So that's the mask slipping. That sense of entitlement's often seen then, and it's often just absolutely jaw-dropping how they just expect to get away with their behavior and they have no problem with it. What was her name? Shoot. The gal, Casey, that's a little girl in Florida. She most likely murdered her daughter. She just got out of jail. I don't remember her last name. But, she was out partying and, here her daughter is missing and then turns up dead, and she just had this total kind of lack of empathy and remorse. I can't believe she got out of prison. That's just wild. But they're very charming, so I guess it's not that surprising. Okay, anyhow, excessive admiration, sense of entitlement, interpersonally exploitative, taking advantage of others to achieve his or her own ends. They're serial liar. They tend to be serial liars, cheaters, and thieves. Again, you have to kind of know them for any length of time to really see this behavior in full effect versus a normal person who might lie from time to time, or even a normal person who might even cheat from time to time which sounds terrible, but you know, a lot of normal people, you know, they do cheat for whatever reasons, or they might even steal money. But narcissists, it tends to be, they're intentionally very exploitative. It's not like there's situations in their life that drive them to lie or to cheat or to steal. This is just what they do because they want to do it. I guess that's kind of the difference. They lack empathy. They're unwilling or unable, I guess, really, to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of others. That's why they have no problem with their behavior, because they just don't see how it impacts us. They're often envious of others and believe others are envious of them, and they show arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Now, 3 things with these different criteria. This enduring pattern of behavior must deviate markedly from their individual culture. So if it's culturally appropriate for them, you know, to wear lots of gold jewelry and to be flashy, I'm Italian, I'm Sicilian actually, but you know, in my culture, it's not unusual for men to wear like a lot of gold jewelry, to be kind of flashy, to dress really stylish. So if a person, you know, if you're a therapist and a person presents into your clinic and they look like that, you know, in American culture, it might seem that's a little over the top, but based on their culture, maybe it wouldn't be. So that wouldn't count. So the other criteria is this enduring pattern of behavior is inflexible and pervasive across a broad range of personal and social situations. So they have to do more than just lie to you, right? They're lying in multiple contexts to multiple people, for example. And the third thing that they have to meet is this enduring pattern of behavior leads to clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Most people, when they go into therapy, they go in because they're having a problem with their life. Narcissists generally don't go to therapy because they don't think that they have the problem. They think everybody else has the problem. So this last clinical trait is really hard to see. It's generally everybody else is coming into therapy. Maybe they're dragging the narcissist along into family therapy. A good therapist should be able to recognize the narcissist is the only one in the room that does not have a problem. Everybody else is a mess. That's kind of a sign that you're with a narcissist. So, okay, so that's narcissism. So then there's several different subcategories of narcissists. You have covert and overt. Those are the 2 main subcategories. Let me back up and say these subcategories, they're not officially recognized by the DSM. These were invented by different psychologists and psychiatrists, and they're not formal. So your therapist or your other mental health worker is probably not going to be familiar with these terms. But they're very, very accurate. I really wish they would add them to the DSM because as a former victim myself, it helps to clarify your experience. So you have covert and overt. Overt is more of your obvious narcissist. They're arrogant, they're grandiose, they are the Donald Trumps, the Kanye Wests. Then you have more covert. These are also called shy or vulnerable narcissists. These types of narcissists tend to be very charming. They tend to be more introverted. They can be introverted. They often can come across as likable. You know, Osama bin Laden is probably a good example of a covert narcissist. You know, if you were to look at the guy, he's very peaceful, he's very quiet. You would never guess that he's masterminding all of these, these terrorist attacks and murders. So another example of a covert narcissist, you could make the case that Ferris Bueller from the movie is a covert narcissist, very charming, very likable, lacks empathy, lacks remorse, grandiose sense of self, right? So then you also have several subcategories after that. You have cerebral narcissists. These are narcissists that are very driven by not so much status. They might not drive a Porsche. They might drive a Subaru, you know? They're more of like, you know, they listen to, you know, maybe NPR. They like, you know, have multiple PhDs. They are very focused on IQ and kind of who they're reading at the time. And they're very intellectually, that's where their intellect is where they get their ego fed from. You have somatic narcissists. Somatic narcissists are very, soma means body, very physically oriented. They probably are in excellent shape, or they have a ton of, you know, name brand statusy. They peacock. These are the peacock narcissists, right? Think Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, Kanye West would probably also be one. You have also delusional narcissists. These narcissists tell really wild stories. And I really don't think that anybody ever believes them because these stories are so grandiose and so over the top. You know, stuff like, oh, well, you know, I have $10 million in the bank, but, you know, I'm a gardener because I just like to be outside. You know, stuff that just doesn't really add up. And let's see. The last kind is malignant narcissists. And malignant narcissists is kind of, it's a blend between psychopaths and sociopaths, which are now called antisocial personality disorder, and narcissist. So it's somewhere in the middle of the two. I would say probably the most, like everybody that I've talked to, myself included, my experience has been with my narcissists that they are malignant. They're like a blend of the two personality disorders, which isn't a huge stretch because both narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial or sociopath psychopaths are both in what's called a cluster B personality disorder. So different personality disorders are in different clusters. Each cluster of personality disorder has its own character traits. So for cluster B, it's known as being the dramatic, erratic, and emotional cluster. So there's 4 personality disorders in there. There's borderline, histrionic, narcissistic, and antisocial. So all of these have kind of different shades of the same color as far as behaviors go. So malignant are somewhere in the middle. They're, you know, all of these people are very incredibly dangerous and they're erratic. They're very unpredictable. So they don't have to necessarily have a history of violence in order to become violent. You know, you look at Scott Peterson, you look at Jodi Arias. These people were really, well, Jodi, people had their spidey sense going off about her, but Scott Peterson, a lot of people really, really liked him. Ted Bundy is another one, right? They really, really liked him. And they were shocked that here he was, this great father, this great family man, this great son, and he murders people. Or Scott, you know, murders his wife. So, you know, I personally think if you have any shade of these two personality disorders in your life, you need to get them out because you just don't know what they're capable of. Therapy and medication do not help them. So it's very important to know. And also, they tend to get worse with therapy, and they also get worse with age. The more time goes by, the better they get at hiding their behavior. So know that. Antisocial personality disorder is kind of on the, you know, the more extreme end of that. Antisocials, very much the same personality traits, except there tends to be a lot more aggression. Sometimes they can be truly like antisocial, meaning, you know, loners. They tend to have behavior, what am I saying? Conduct disorders before the age of 15. You know, torturing, abusing, killing animals or other people at a young age is not unusual for them, especially the animal part. You know, they're a lot more aggressive. The kids that did Columbine, I would say would be considered, you know, antisocial or on the unofficial scale at a minimum like malignant narcissists. So that's kind of the difference there. Realize that, again, like I said, not all narcissists have all of these red flags that I'm going to go over. So if you're dealing with somebody and they don't have all of these red flags, or maybe they don't even have them all to like a troubling degree, it doesn't mean that the person that you're dealing with isn't a narcissist. It just means that that red flag is not one of their defining characteristics. So, you know, as usual, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, frustrations, ideas for videos, points you want me to cover, points you feel like I didn't cover correctly or didn't cover adequately, let me know. I'd love to get feedback. So you can message me here on Facebook or on YouTube, or you can also find me on Facebook. My group is called Narcissist Support, or you can find me on my website, which I'll also put down here. It's called narcissistsupport.com. Okay, thanks. I hope you enjoy the series.